welcome to the devMode.fm podcast, dedicated to the tools, techniques, and technologies used in modern web development. This is our episode numero uno, covering Craft CMS 3, RC1. And appearing with me here in our beautiful studio in upstate New York, I've got Patrick Harrington. You want to tell us a little bit about yourself, Patrick?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. My name is Patrick Harrington. I run Mildly Geeky here in Boston. I've been doing craft since 2013 and spend way too much of my day on Craft Slack.
And we've got Michael Rogg.
Hey, y'all. I am Michael. I am the proprietor of Top Shelf Craft, a craft plugin dev shop. I host the Craft podcast, and I run a small web dev team down here in Texas.
And finally, we have Jonathan Melville.
Hello. So I'm out of Atlanta, Georgia, and I've been doing craft development since about 2013. And we're a small team. Yeah, we specialize in craft and Enact CMS.
You've got something special going on right now.
And the salt comes out already.
I do.
That did not take long.
Yeah. So just to go ahead and head off any potential weirdness, I'm recording this from the hospital where my wife has unexpectedly gone into labor and given birth to our son. So we're very happy about that, but you know how these things go. I may have to duck out, but I'll definitely hang around as long as I can.
That is dedication right there.
Oh, of course. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, of course, I'm Andrew Welch from NY Studio 107, and today we're going to be talking about Craft 3 RC1. So the first release candidate of Craft CMS is out. And for anyone who doesn't know, a release candidate is basically a version that the developer thinks could be the actual general availability release. Doesn't mean it's finished, but it does mean that they think it could be. They think it's a candidate to be the actual release. And the feature set is frozen. And a lot of people, now that the RC is out, are taking a look at it. And I think one of the biggest questions that people are having is, should I use this in production? So I'd like to kind of hear from our panel here and see who is using this in production and when you think it might be a good idea to start using it in production. Patrick, why don't you go ahead and go first?
Yeah, sure. We have a couple projects right now that are using Craft 3. Similar to any time we have new technology, we try to start with something small and just minimize the risk, not knowing what we were going to be up against, and also just thinking that because the plugin community is so large in Craft 2, but it's just really starting to catch on in Craft 3 now. We want to make sure that we weren't going to have any real heavy plugin needs. Mm-hmm. So we have a small site that's ready to go. We're just waiting on some content entry, but yeah, it's been great to work with. Another project that is kind of in a staging situation. It'll be there for a while, but it's there's nothing stopping it from going to production. It's been great. I think it's more than ready to use in production as long as there are no big gaps from what you need in a plugin.
And speaking of plugins, Craft CMS just tweeted out that there are 99 plugins in the Craft 3 plugin store.
Quick, jump onto a plugin factory. Let's make one quick.
Yeah, get number 100. How about you, Michael? What do you think is the criteria between choosing whether you're going to use Craft 3 for a new project right now?
So I think it has to do with your familiarity with a developer or as an agency with the product, and also kind of the needs of the project. If you have a project that's going to go live this next summer and not much else on your plate, then jump right in. And I think in terms of stability, it's ready. I'm using Craft 3 on all of my new client projects right now and all of my personal projects right now. But on the flip side, if you have something that comes in hot and needs to be turned around in 2 days, and Craft 2 is the tool that backwards and forwards, and you haven't even looked at Craft 3 yet, then obviously you gotta make the right choice for each moment. But I think it's stability wise, it's ready. Nothing is going to jump out of a cabinet and tank your site unexpectedly. The bugs that are there, everybody sort of knows about, and you can shim around them until they get fixed. So, yeah, I'm using Craft 3.
Yeah, and I think it's a good time to note that the timetable that Pixel and Tonic has announced is that the general availability release will be April 4th, 2018. And that's when the plugin store for paid plugins and Commerce 2 and Craft 3 will all be ready, and that's when the whole shebang is going to be ready to go. How about you, Jonathan? What are you looking at in terms of Craft 3 projects, and what is your decision-making process on whether to use it or not?
Yeah, so I do have a project coming up. It has like a tentative launch date of around April. So this is going to be around the time when the release candidate is going to be coming out. And so, I mean, it's already pretty stable at this point. If you sort of play around with it, or if you've had some kind of like staging sites, like what Patrick was talking about, where you've been using it, it's pretty easy to see that there's really nothing glaring in terms of, major problems with the functionality. The only thing that sort of has to play catch up a little bit is the plugins.
Right.
So I don't know if anybody's ever heard of this plugin called SEOmatic. So I use this on almost every site. I'm sure, well, as evidenced by Pixel and Tonic, a lot of other people do too. So it's just kind of, at this point, it's kind of waiting for these plugins to sort of come on board and become stable,
Right.
so that we can use these in production sites. So actually, this project that I mentioned in April, we're going to go ahead and start it on Craft 3 because I think the timeline just worked out for it, such that the release candidate is coinciding with the kind of general launch time frame that we have for it. So it just kind of made sense for us. If I was starting a smaller project that had to be up by the end of the year or something, I probably wouldn't pursue the Craft 3 route, just because your client ultimately wants a site that works
Right.
properly, and there's no unexpected hiccups and stuff like that. But I'm excited. I'm excited to have a Craft 3 site in production. I'm excited to start working on it, and all looks well.
Yeah. So, I mean, and that's the other important thing to keep in mind is that Pixel and Tonic announced with the release of Craft CMS 3 RC1 that they are officially supporting it. Right? So if you do decide to use this thing in production, you're actually going to be able to file support tickets and expect that Pixel and Tonic is going to respond to them, which I think is kind of an important thing. So for myself, I am planning to use Craft 3 on all new projects going forward. I've just invested a whole lot of time in learning it and developing for it. And yes, I am working on SEOmatic for Craft 3. It's coming out. Yes, it's coming. But one thing that I'm not doing yet is I'm not looking into upgrading Craft 2 sites. And the reason is that starting a new project is fine, especially as you guys were mentioning, you've got a time horizon that's usually several months ahead, and everything is kind of just going to come together, so it's a good time to start doing it. But upgrading existing sites, at least for me, they may be using a ton of plugins that are not ported yet. For a new project, you can work around that. You've got some lead time. But for upgrading existing Craft 2 sites, what I'm doing is kind of, first of all, a lot of clients have to authorize that work. But I'm also waiting on those. So kind of interestingly, new projects are Craft 3. But I don't have anything currently on the horizon where it's an upgrade from Craft 2. Or how about you guys? Is anyone looking at actually upgrading an existing site?
Yeah. I've upgraded all of my own sites. And I've got one client project that we took the first 80% of the way on Craft 2 and looking pretty seriously at hopping tracks and finishing the project up on Craft 3. It's not using any crazy plugins that don't exist yet for Craft 3. So we may. I have found the upgrade, if you're not running a whole bunch of custom plugins, like the Craft 2 to Craft 3 upgrade is pretty smooth. So I've updated a couple sites, but
What plugins are you missing?
Trying not to get crazy. Well, I'm missing SEO-matic.
I know.
And friggin' this NY Studio guy seems to want to release everything lately except SEO-matic.
I tell you what.
So really losing confidence in
Oh, that
the
hurts,
SEO-matic
man.
in the SEO-matic. Maybe it'll come out sometime in 2019. No, I kid. SEO-matic is a big one, and yeah, actually, that's kind of the only.
Oh my God, the pressure.
It's kind of the only
Actually-
one. There's
actually-
another one. There's another one that I would name, except I don't want to tip any hands just yet. But yeah, SEO-matic. Could
All
you
right.
just go ahead and get on that, please?
All right. Yeah, I actually am working on it. I actively need it for several projects that I'm working on. So believe me, it's going to happen. What were you going to say, Jonathan? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to add that the other one that came to mind was the Happy Brad plugin.
Oh yeah.
I found that
Oh, it's done.
Yeah, that's been
great.
ported.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, my
By the way.
clients can't do without seeing Brad's face on the control panels.
I feel
They
like
have to be.
that's a first-party plugin now. I think I saw something scroll up on the Slack where
I think they forked it. Yeah.
where Brandon forked it, and
Yep.
now it's going to be.
I'm thinking maybe like $20 on the plugin store when it launches. That'd be well worth it.
if it,
God.
no brainer.
All right. So now that we've got a rough idea of what we're doing with Craft Free, let's talk about why we're using it. Like Patrick, what are the top 3 features in Craft 3 that have you kind of excited? And you only get 3.
Only
Okay.
get 3.
You only get 3.
Composer is one. Just installing and updating plugins has gotten a whole lot easier, as well as I'll make number 2. CLI installs, being able to install a new site
Living
right
up
over
to
the command line.
Yeah, living up to your mildly geeky persona.
I'm going deep, baby. Yeah, doing that is nice, and maybe you can talk a little bit about how you've taken and really forked the Craft installer and been able to kind of make your own, which is one of those things that's always been on my to-do list of making my own bespoke mildly geeky Craft installer, but them kind of giving you a blueprint for it, I find just makes that a whole lot easier.
Yeah, for sure. Well, what's number 3?
I don't want to take all the good ones. This is,
Take it.
Yeah, performance. It's just so much snappier.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can think of a whole lot more, but I'll leave some room. I'm sure Rog has some good ones.
What do you think, Michael?
Performance is definitely on my list.
Yep.
The Yi2 Foundation is exciting to me as a plugin developer. Just having all the new modern PHP toys,
that's 2.
and the way that that the architecture of Yi2 has really inspired some new architectural choices in Craft.
Right.
And then that kind of ripples and inspires really nice architecture choices for plugin developers like me.
We'll make that 2.5. What's number 3?
So I feel like not just performance from Yi2, but also just the opportunity to really up my game and see some really good examples of excellently crafted code, and then trying to live up to that foundation with my own code. I'm excited about the Q runner. We do a ton of work in tasks in Craft 2, and it's not glamorous. It's kind of esoteric, but like a ton of content migration, a ton of content cleanup, a ton of like integrations and synchronizations that all run in tasks. And I'm not going to say that tasks in Craft 2 are badly implemented, but they have a lot of inherent challenges because of the way they run, and the queue runner in Craft 3. I'm just so excited for working with a real proper queue.
Well, that's 3.
And
That's 3, man. You reached your limit.
it's 2. That's 2.
No, no,
I
no.
said
We got
Ye2.
performance.
You got
We got
performance.
Ye2.
But Patrick already took performance.
You're cut off. Jonathan, what
All
do you
right,
think?
fine.
Well, this one hasn't been mentioned yet, but I was going to say performance.
Okay. Okay, right. All
Yeah,
right.
I think the full gamut's been covered, but yeah, I mean, so Craft 2 by no means is a slowpoke.
Oh,
But,
it is for some things.
yeah, I mean, but like when you compare it to Craft 3, you've got U2, which greatly
Yeah.
improves things like time to first byte. I mean, it's a substantial improvement in performance. This is probably the thing I'm absolutely most excited about.
Yeah. I'm not going to let you off the hook, though. You got to give me 3.
Okay, I'll give you some more. So I, like everyone else, I do like being able to do things from the command line. I think the ability to do command line installs, managing Craft itself as a dependency. When you're setting up your repo, it always felt just a little bit dirty to kind of, have to include it the way that you did. To be able to just include it as part of your composer dependencies, that's very cool. Yeah,
That's 2.
Yeah, that's 2. Okay, let's see. Let me think here. I like the approach that's being taken for things like accessing the service APIs directly in Twig, as opposed to doing like craft.request and all this
Right.
kind of stuff, which is kind of just like a wrapper around the native way to do it in EE. You can just access it directly in your Twig. So this gives the front end folks a lot more power to go in and have access to a lot of these tools in the API that would have previously required you to write some custom plugin. That's not the end of the world, but still, it's so much more convenient to not have to do that.
Yeah.
You can just go ahead and grab that API access directly right in your Twig. So that'd be my number 3.
Yeah, for people who don't know, basically, the entire Craft application instance, for all intents and purposes, is now available in your templates via craft.app. So in Craft 2, they kind of just made available what they thought people would want. Now you kind of get the whole shebang. So for a lot of, as Jonathan was mentioning, for a lot of things where you might have written a simple plugin or paid someone to write a simple plugin to expose some functionality, now you don't have to. You got access to all of that. And how, for PHPStorm users, Patrick, how freaking awesome is it that you dared to dream, installed the Symphony plugin, even though I looked at the Stack Exchange post and I tried like some of their @var hints, and then I looked and they said they were needing the plugin. I was like, it'll never work. But you were just
probably
like,
skipped over the part where it said actually enable the plugin.
no.
Project.
I didn't think that plugin would help with anything with Craft. I thought it was Symphony specific. Right. You installed it. How awesome is it that you now get auto completion of every single Craft method, every third-party tweak filter, everything in your templates?
Yeah, it's I thought there was still an argument previously for using Sublime or not Atom. No one should use Atom, but for using whatever Coda, whatever, because they're nice and performant. And yes, PHPStorm can be a little slow, but you can fix that by kind of pulling back some of what it does. But now that you have real like auto completion of your craft.app variables right in your Twig, I don't know how I could ever code
it's so
Craft
nice.
sites. Yeah, it used to be like the line was, well, if you're doing PHP development, you need to use PHPStorm. And now, if you're doing Twig development, you really should be using PHPStorm.
Yeah.
I'd love to see eventually. I used to work for a .NET company, and they actually, in their CMS, they built an entire tool that would stub out for every, in Craft speak, entry type. It would stub out classes that included mappings for every possible field.
Oh, that's nice.
If you could have that, even if it was just used for documentation purposes and the classes weren't actually used behind the scenes, that would really be impressive.
Well,
the only nagging thing that you pointed out is you do have to put in these little comments.
Right.
But I think some people have started to push for it being implemented globally.
We're working on figuring that out. And the thing that I really want, just to keep going on this tangent for a minute, is I really want the deprecation errors that, like, if you're using PHPStorm, a lot of people think that PHPStorm, I don't need it because it's for PHP development. No. all of the functionality of their WebStorm product for JavaScript, for HTML, for Twig, for whatever, that's all in PHPStorm, as well as a decent amount of their data grip product. So you can actually use it to directly access your MySQL or your Postgres database. So you don't need SQL Pro or whatever. You can just do it all right there. It's got a terminal built into it. It's got everything. But what I really would like to see is the, especially for the transition from Craft 2 to Craft 3, is the Twig deprecation errors to show up in the editor the same way they do in PHP. But anyway, I don't want to get too much off on the PHPStorm tangent. So for
It's
me,
a pretty good commercial for PHPStorm.
it saves me so much time though. I mean,
You do a
I love it.
PHPStorm episode.
I love
Gosh.
it. And I remember talking to Patrick like 2 years ago,
Yeah.
and he was sitting there using PHPStorm, and I was just kind of like, I don't know. And he's like, no, trust me, it's really good. I'm like, fine. And I mean, I wish I had listened to him sooner. It's just absolutely incredible. But my top 3 features for Craft 3, number 1 is definitely going to be performance. I know everyone else has said it, but, you know, it's a thing. And the performance is amazing, especially a lot of the database transactions have been streamlined. I think my second favorite thing is probably the addition of the plugin store. And not just for the obvious reason that I develop plugins, and I would like to start selling them so I can support them and make them better. But also because when you have something like that, you're then nurturing an ecosystem that is going to grow much quicker than if there is no kind of organized store. And, you know, I've heard some people gripe about, well, I don't want to pay for this or I don't want to pay for that. The reality is that you want to pay for these things because you want to encourage developers to work on this stuff and maintain it. And,
Right.
you know, when I look at what a billable hour costs, and then I look at a plugin that will take care of that for me, I mean, yeah, there's some risk. You got to make sure that it's from a developer you trust and they're not going to abandon it and all that kind of thing. But I just look at it from the amount of time that it will save me. So my number 2 is definitely the plugin store. I think it's going to be really big from the point of view of getting people on board to make this ecosystem even bigger than it already is. And I think my number 3 probably would be the move to Composer and all that gives you in terms of the CLI installs, in terms of being able to create boilerplate projects. So I guess, Patrick, you asked me to talk about it real quick, so I will. What I effectively, when you do Composer create project, and then you give it Craft CMS /CMS, or sorry, /Craft, what you're actually doing is it's effectively taking a GitHub repo and cloning it down onto your computer, but then removing the Git data. So you've got like this fresh project to start with. And the fun thing about that is you don't have to use Craft CMS's boilerplate. Like I created my own, and it installs all of my default directories. It installs my Craft scripts. It installs my Craft multi-environment, and I wrote a little setup program that automates all that stuff. But the point is that you can really easily create scaffolding. You know, put it in Packagist. If you need it to be private, Packagist has private repositories too. And then when you go to start a project, you can just type Composer project create, my company name /Craft, and boom, you've got all that boilerplate right there ready to go. So those are my top 3. But here's what I've heard from everybody, performance, and then I heard a bunch of nerdy stuff from all of us. But so my question is, how do we sell our clients on this? How do we, the clients that we have that are on Craft 2, how do we go to them and say, hey, I really think you should allocate some time and money for me to upgrade this to Craft 3? So Patrick, how would you approach that with a client? Like, what features are client-centric that you would say, hey, this is why you should update?
That's a good question. I mean, performance is something. If your client is
huge,
frustrated by how quickly it takes to load their site, hopefully they're already on PHP 7, but if you have a site that's an older Craft 2 site, it's still on 5.6. If you're going to be going through all that to maybe get onto a new server, because they are looking to gain, an extra, quarter second or so on page load, that could be one. We could go back to performance on that. To be honest, I think a lot of my Craft 2 sites will stay Craft 2 sites for a while. There's, especially with client work, there's the, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And so until there's any sort of, I'm sure at some point Craft 2 will no longer be supported for updates, and if there's a security error, thing found, or just the fact that they don't want to be on a platform that's not being supported, however many months or years down the line that is, that's probably one of the biggest places I'll see. Or if someone is going through a major redesign, then I'd absolutely be starting on Craft 3.
How about you, Michael? How would you've got a client that you said is 80% done on Craft 2. What is your pitch going to be to spend the extra time and money to convert that over to Craft 3?
Yeah, well, so you cut me off before my favorite number 3.5.
You're not allowed 3.5, man. You're only allowed 3. What do you think? The rules don't apply to you?
So the specific the specific project that I mentioned earlier, performance would actually be a really big sell on that project, but also stuff like, just stuff that a client can log in and poke around with, like the native image editor, the focal point editor is huge. Clients love that.
Yep.
Especially, a lot of the projects that we do are heavily art directed, or have really good like content marketing teams that love playing around in a CMS. So yeah, image editor is going to be real fun. Image focal points going to be real fun. The announcement to add a CK editor plugin to the mix is, even if a client doesn't know what CK editor is, they will perceive a difference in user experience between Redactor and CK editor.
And they probably felt the pain of Redactor.
In some cases they did.
Yeah.
And so for me to be able to tell them, the better editor, buttons you care about, a little bit nicer for me to customize the editor experience, that's gonna register.
Well, all right. Let's punt it over to Jonathan.
Yeah,
What do you think, Jonathan? Like you've got a number of pretty high profile clients. How are you going to do the pitch to them to say, hey, I know we just did this site a year ago or so, but I think we should upgrade it to Craft 3. Like, how are you going to sell that to them?
Well, I think we're going to have to decide if we make that pitch. I think clients, if they're going to spend dollars, you're always going to have some clients that are going to see the value in things like performance or, less of a hassle when they paste their text into the rich text editor or working with that functionality. And they'll see value in that. But there is a large, if it ain't broke, don't fix it mentality. Yep. So you would, depending on the complexity of the site, you could end up spending a whole lot of money, and the client turns around and doesn't really see what they've paid for.
Right.
It's like, the control panel looks a little bit nicer. It's like, maybe I can tell there's a little bit, the site's a little faster. I don't know. Really, those performance gains come from things like if the site's under heavy load, maybe it'd be more performant. Not necessarily the client, like you run the upgrade and the client's just like, yeah, that's way faster.
Right.
So,
although I'll tell you, like just logging into the admin CP, like it really is kind of a night and day difference.
That's true. That's true. There is some you can perceive it to a certain extent, but so like some of these sites that we have, they're like commerce sites, so that's another layer of complication on top of the fact that there's like custom like integration with ShipStation or all this kind of stuff that would have to also be upgraded. So I think at a certain point, it does, you do have to sit down and think, do we even want to pursue this. And I think you present it to the client, like you give them all the pros.
Oh, are you being paged
Yes,
in the hospital?
I'm a
We're a baby.
reminder. It's just a code blue, guys. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
Just a code blue. So, good grief. All right. This can go in the blooper reel.
I'll tell you what. No, it's fine. I'm gonna keep it in there. I like it raw. I like it real.
Okay.
So
Well, it looks like the code blue is ended.
I appreciate the point that like the question of what features will our customers appreciate is a different conversation than are we going to pitch a Craft 2 to Craft 3 upgrade for such and such project.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting because we as developers are ridiculously excited about Craft 3. Like from my point of view, developing for Craft 3 is fantastic because it's more of it's almost a content management framework, right? Like you can add modules to it. You can override any part of the functionality you want. I mean, there even could be arguments to using Craft 3 instead of something like Laravel for certain custom things that you want to be able to build an app-ish product, but you also want an admin CP on the back end, and you don't want to have to develop that all yourself. And the fact that you're able to, or the development for Craft 3 is really just like developing a Yi app, a Yi 2 app, but you just happen to get all this awesome stuff that Pixel and Tonic made on top of it. But then, so as a developer, I'm super excited about it. But then I look at it from a client's perspective, and it is kind of a tough sell because you can tell them it's going to be faster, which is great. They'll be like, okay, that's wonderful. But there isn't a whole lot in terms of client visible features that are new. Now, we as developers know that they rewrote the whole goddamn thing, and there's a ton of work in there, right? But when a user looks at it or a client looks at it, there's the performance, there's some UI tweaks. The fact that there's a plugin store probably is a plus. Although I think a lot of the clients I work with are probably going to be depending on me to pick and choose and install plugins. The image editor that you mentioned, Jonathan, I think is definitely a huge thing. But from the point of view of selling it to clients, I mean, I'm kind of in the same position you are, Jonathan, I think, where it'll be part of a larger conversation when it's time to refresh the site.
Right. And I think we all want to feel good about what we're selling to our clients. So, like, if I feel like there's not that much value in it to the client, I mean, if it's a well-built Craft 2 site with no issues, then there may not be a good case for it. If you have a site that's definitely suffering from performance issues or they're frustrated with some feature that could be improved by going to Craft 3, then pursue it.
Well, there is one other thing that is where Pixel and Tonic comes into the mix, which is how long they say they're going to support Craft 2, right? Because part of the conversation for people that their website is a big part of their business, I mean, they care about maintenance updates and security updates and all that kind of fun stuff. So if Pixel and Tonic comes out and says, hey, we're only going to support Craft 2 for the next year, from the time that Craft 3 is released, then that gives us another thing that we can have a conversation with our clients about. Like, hey, look, not only is this thing better, but you want that support and you want those updates. So it's time to kind of get on the bandwagon for that.
Right. I think that's a good point. Is distinguishing maybe a site where it serves the role of marketing for a company versus a site that is the company, like they're selling stuff on it or something like that.
Right.
I think that's maybe a clear case for going with the product that's going to be supported for the long haul.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, I mean, one other thing that I'm looking forward to in Craft 3, and this is going to sound horribly narcissistic or whatever, but one of the reasons I want to be using Craft 3 for new projects is some of the plugins that I wrote or am writing, I want to use them. Like the image optimize plugin that I wrote, that in conjunction with the image editor, for me, for like 90% plus of sites, is just going to be absolutely amazing to be able to use. And all of that templating that I had to do in order to get images optimized and at responsive sizes and all that kind of fun stuff. I don't have to do that anymore, and I'm really looking forward to that too.
Yeah.
And some of you guys are also probably in the same boat, probably Michael especially, that some of the plugins that you're working on, like you want to use them on your new projects, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, for sure. So what plugins are we all waiting on? Now I know I'm going to get a whole lot of grief for SEOmatic, and please go ahead. Each of you can give it to me if you want. But what other plugins are you kind of waiting on, Patrick, for sites? Both Craft 2.x sites that you want to upgrade, and then also for new projects.
Yeah, I know. Super Table is one that has come in handy for us. That one. Who's the developer of Super Table?
That's Josh.
Josh.
Yeah. I think he said that's coming along pretty well.
Now known as verb.io.
There it is. Linkit is a really handy little one that I've used on so many sites, especially if you ever just want to give your clients the ability to plop a button at the end of something and you don't know if they're going to want to link to a PDF or to an external URL or to another entry or anything. It's really versatile and really improves the client experience of just creating links and buttons and controlling, what's the text for the link of a dedicated link field.
Now, are we ready to talk about something you might or might not be doing with that thing?
No.
Okay.
And then Freeform is a stellar one. SoulSpace was such a big part of the expression engine ecosystem and continues to be. And now they've become, I think, a really big player as well in Craft. And Freeform, we've had great experience for clients that need a form builder. So really excited to at some point hopefully see that one move over to Craft 3.
Now, what do you think? I was actually thinking about this the other day. So one of the requirements for having a plugin in the plugin store is that you have it in a public GitHub repo. Do you think SoulSpace is going to care about that?
Yeah, I've been privy to some conversations, so I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I know Mitchell was very actively involved in the early plugin store discussions when everything was going back around pricing and everything.
Yep.
I mean, you could do private packagist, I'm assuming, if you wanted to hide it a bit more. But that's a good question. It would be a good question for Mitchell and those folks over at SoulSpace.
Maybe we'll have to have him on.
Yeah.
How about you, Michael? Are there any plugins that we already kind of went over it a little bit with you, but are there any other plugins that maybe they're not blocking you, but you really are looking forward to seeing them on Craft 3?
There are a couple, and I'm working on them.
Yeah, your own, right? Yeah.
So if you if you are not already signed up for my Craftmas list, then you should go get on it and get some presents.
Give people the URL if you want them to go.
I will be topshelfcraft.com/Craftmas.
There you go.
I will be getting I will be getting presents right along with all of you because I am waiting on myself to finish several plugins.
Yeah, welcome to my hell.
Right. Well, if you could just stop releasing everything other than SEOmatic and that'd be great.
It's true though. I have ported
you have
almost everything. The only two that so Instant Analytics is not completely done because I'm waiting on Commerce 2 for that. But then there are only 3 other plugins I haven't ported. One is Route Map that probably no one cares about other than me or people that are using service workers or front end frameworks like React or Vue. And then there's SEOmatic, and then there is Retour. And those are the only 3 that have not been ported. And SEOmatic and Retour are my 2 most popular ones, which is hilarious.
I'm done with Supersort. Legacy Login is just about done. The XL import is just about done. Like all the unsexy ones are pretty much done. The one actually that that is holding up a couple projects for me is Printmaker, and getting the next release of Printmaker out.
Well, what about FeedMe? Like for new projects, like we need some way to get the data in there.
I was going to mention that too. Yeah, FeedMe is something that I use on almost every new site because you've got to. That's the best way to get
Yeah, it's the best way.
Data migrated in.
Yeah. Now I know
You got to bring up
Michael.
what I'm doing.
I know Michael that you use your own custom import stuff, so we're not even going to talk to you about that. We know you don't care about FeedMe, but something.
I care.
Well,
And more than that, I
You're
know
heartless.
that a lot of other people care.
Yeah. But yeah, what Patrick is doing, which is what makes complete sense, is he's using FeedMe to import it into Craft 2, and then he's upgrading it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right?
Mhm.
You know?
Yeah, and it's looking pretty good. It's just
not a bad way to go.
it's a little scary though, because like once I've done that and moved everything over, like that data import has to be totally like stamped approved, because once I've made that move, then I'm in trouble if it turns out, oh, you didn't map that field properly. So
Right.
FeedMe is absolutely an important one.
Right. Well, I'm glad I'm not the only person that people are waiting on. All the pressure. How about you, Jonathan? Are there any other plugins that you kind of are go-to that maybe they don't have to be there for you to do a new site, but you really would like to see them?
Well, you mentioned you went ahead and shamed yourself by mentioning Retour.
Yeah.
So Retour, we actually, you wrote Retour for. Did you write that for the Barefoot Contessa project? Yeah.
I did.
So that was absolutely essential for a site where there's just tons of pages that are already indexed out there.
Yep.
And you're doing a new version of it to make sure you don't have 404 craziness happening on relaunch. But then also, I just think it's interesting how many plugins that used to be essential are kind of going to not necessarily be required in Craft 3.
Right.
So like Focus Point, I think you've already mentioned that.
Gone.
And like that was like one of the first things that got installed. I'm trying to think of something else.
Well, and you know, I love Imager and I love Andre.
Yeah.
But I'm honestly going to be glad to not have to use Imager for a whole lot of my new sites, right? Because it definitely does some things that nothing else does. But what I was using that for was A, to optimize the images by removing all the cruft from them, and then B, to create the responsive image sizes, right?
Right.
And that's what I wrote Image Optimize to do. And for like 90% plus of my sites, boom, install, click, done. You know, glad to not be doing that kind of front end templating stuff anymore.
Plus, you're going to get some really cool features with it, like the SVGs for placeholders.
Yeah, right.
All kind of fancy stuff.
Well, the other fun thing, and guys, I feel guilty of talking about my stuff too much, but what the hell? The other thing that I'm really jazzed about is you can actually pick what method you want to use for doing the image resizing. So if you use ImageX, you can just go into the admin CP, switch it from Craft to ImageX, and boom, all of your image resizing and manipulations will then all go through ImageX. And the key there is that you don't have to make any template changes, right? You don't have to learn a plugin's funky syntax for making these things or whatever. It just works by intercepting what Craft is doing. And I think that's going to be huge from the point of view of, people can, they get it up and running on Craft using native transforms. The client says it's too slow or whatever. Switch it over to ImageX. Boom, you're done. Like you literally have nothing else to do. Or on the other hand, if you're using ImageX and the client decides that they don't like the monthly bills, you can just switch it back without having to change anything,
I agree that's going to be really big. And granted, all of that should be in config anyway. Like anytime we use Imager or whatever, it's all, we're pulling variables out of a config file, so we don't have to make template changes.
Right.
But I think what I like about that specific point is there's a lot in Craft from a developer standpoint that is kind of following this pattern. All of the new the asset source setup and the mailers, where you can just kind of drop in a blob to your config file, and all of a sudden your assets are on S3 or they're on Dropbox, or you're using Mailgun to send your emails, or you're using SparkPost to send your emails, and this is kind of a place where you're following that pattern, which is a pattern that I just think makes the developer life just so much easier. as long as we were talking about plugins that we're waiting on,
Yep.
there's also this giant elephant in the room, which is commerce
Right.
/ charge.
Yeah.
We
Right.
and we're not starting any new commerce projects, any new big commerce projects, for until April. So
Well, they said they're going
um,
to have a beta out in early 2018.
yeah,
Yeah.
but I mean, I'm not going to go launch a giant e-commerce project for a client
I
on a
agree.
beta because that's not quite responsible.
Yep.
So that's one that I'm waiting on for. And granted, we're still like doing some stuff with Commerce One, but that's going to be an exciting thing to drop
Mm-hmm.
when it drops.
So I actually have another kind of question in terms of getting Craft 3 out there and adopted. Have you? I mean, we're all pretty nerdy, right? I mean, all of us love the CLI. We don't mind junking around and doing stuff. Is Craft 3? Is it too? Is there too much for people to have to learn to be able to use it? Because let's face it, there are a ton of craft developers out there that don't know Composer, don't want to know Composer. Do you guys think that's a problem?
Well, I mean, I know that the only way to install it now is Composer, but is that going to be how it is when it actually launches for real? It's still going to require Composer, or is there also going to be like an installer?
So what
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
Go ahead.
GA they said will not require Composer.
right.
Okay.
it will
I think
require
we'll still use it. Right.
it
You
will
can
require
use it if you want
Composer.
to.
It will require Composer, but interestingly, Craft CMS has an internal dependency on Composer. So it itself installs its own Composer. So people don't know
right.
it. But when they click update or when they update a plugin, they're actually using this Composer that's kind of built into Craft. But
So
I mean,
it doesn't require that your local development environment have Composer.
correct.
Right.
Okay.
Well, and it
Correct.
doesn't require that you yourself know anything about Composer.
But do you guys think that? I mean, here's the thing. Like, there's a spectrum of developers, right? There are Laravel type developers who kind of looked at Craft and they're like, I don't really want to develop for that, because they're looking for something more framework-ish.
Or syntactic sugar.
Yeah, Brad Bell loves his sugar.
Yo, sign up for the Craftmas List, man. I got so much syntactic sugar coming for you.
But okay, the diabetes aside, okay, the point is that for a decent number of people, they don't want to have to learn Composer to do this stuff. I mean, I don't know, and I can definitely understand people who have never worked with Composer that kind of look at this and they're like, "Holy crap!" What do I have to do here? But yeah, they will be able to download the full version, and in theory, they should never notice the difference. I mean, I love the fact that I'm going to be able to use the command line to do all this stuff. Like, I think it's fantastic. And I think that even if you are a developer that would rather just click the download and it works, I still think that it's really useful to have some understanding of what's going on under the hood for when stuff goes wrong, so you can then figure it out. But
Agreed.
yeah, but getting back to what I was saying about there being a spectrum of developers, so there's the Laravel type developers are going to be thrilled by Craft 3 because they can just treat it like a content management framework and they can build their own app around it and kind of away they go. But then you also have, on the other kind of end of the spectrum, you have designer developers who, the fact that they're using, the fact that they have learned Twig is kind of a big deal. And maybe they use a little JavaScript, but mostly it's just a package that they include. Do you think the bar has gotten too high for them, or does that matter?
Yeah, I mean, I think once there's that zip file out there where people just they download the zip, they point their web root at. It used to be public, now it's web.
Mm-hmm.
If I remember correctly, isn't there now an actual a GUI for connecting to the database if you booted it up without that?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're confusing the beta and RC period with what it will look like when they're not, pushing new builds every handful of days and they're in a stable place and they have that nice clean zip file I mean, you can make the case that it'll be easier at that point because, yeah, you know, Composer is self-contained. People can, you know, similar to WordPress or Drupal, just try to go to the URL and it says, hey, you haven't set up your database yet. Here, we're going to walk you right through it. Well, with Craft 2, you know, you had to go and find your config.db PHP file. You know, I think, yeah, right now we're kind of on the wild west of betas and RCs, and it definitely feels like it would be tough for someone who's never been in that ecosystem of Composer to pick that up so quickly. But once there's that zip file, people who you know enjoy that, just grabbing a zip file and knowing they don't have to touch the terminal,
Yeah.
you know, I think everyone will be happy.
And doesn't that open up the possibility for, you know, there's in the WordPress world, there's WordPress hosting. How awesome would it be if, you know, one of the Craft partners or Pixel and Tonic or whoever came up with their own hosting scenario where, oh, you want space with Craft installed? Boom, here you go. And it installs a preset config. They don't have to ever deal with setting up a server. They don't have to deal with anything. They just kind of work on it. I mean, I see that as a ripe opportunity.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, and I know that at least multiple people are thinking
Sure.
quite earnestly about that. I know at least 2 hosting companies that that have that on their radar, and a few others. But
As well they should.
yeah, even in terms of like the dig down deep dev stuff,
Mm-hmm.
I think that the bar has been raised a little in
Yep.
terms of, you know, what you need to have on your radar in order to really understand this code base. But I don't actually think that's a bad thing. I mean, I care much more for the trajectory that the dev world is on, much more for you know the direction it's going than where it's at in terms of you know what people are using and what people feel like they can use. Because like I still think back to myself not very long ago at all, and I, you know, looking back at my past self, like I don't even know that I would call myself a quote unquote, you know, air quotes, real developer, right? Like back in the days when I was like first learning to spin up sites with like Expression Engine, and like I was an Expression Engine developer, but if I like edged outside of Expression Engine, like it was no man's land, and I just felt really uncomfortable. And it was the same on the front end with like jQuery, right? Like I could, or like, you know, Moo Tools, right? I could do cool stuff on a page with Moo Tools, but in the absence of this library, like I felt like I was lost if I tried to like look at just vanilla JavaScript. But then, you know, slowly but surely, using Expression Engine, writing little stupid plugins for Expression Engine, then writing slightly more complicated plugins for Expression Engine, and then debugging stuff, and the same on the front end. You know, maybe I can tweak this little jQuery plugin to do something slightly differently, right? Like we take patterns from these tools and these code bases that we consume, and that is how we learn and get this pattern recognition. And so, like, I feel that Craft taking on a lot of this modern tool set,
Right.
like even if initially it makes people just a little bit scared, the reality is that in order to, you know, be successful in the next few years, you are going to have to put some of this stuff on your radar.
Yep.
And so having sort of a nice boilerplate world where you can look at this stuff being used and used really well, I think makes the learning curve easier. And I think it puts us all, you know, in a really nice place to just kind of learn by example and learn by tweaking.
I think I got it. I think I got it, Michael. I know that there's an expression for this that's perfect. A rising tide lifts all boats, right? I mean, they're raising the standards bar,
Yeah.
and in doing so, they're floating everyone up along with it. You know,
and I think this is the clear right direction to head in versus the other direction of, well, let's appeal to the
Right.
easier, kind of less dev-centric way of doing it. I mean, this is clearly the best path forward.
Yeah, like it or not, in my opinion, the low end websites are gone. Like they're going to be done in Wix. They're going to be done in
Yeah.
Webflow. They're going to be done in these
Squarespace,
services.
yeah. I mean, I agree. I think that the market, like if we're talking about the sort of simpler way of doing it, these are going to be people using Squarespace anyway. So why limit the ability of people that are sort of doing it at the next level?
And you can be a designer and you can use these tools, and there's nothing wrong with them, right? I mean, not every tool has to be used for every single job, but I think that the money in doing these kind of lower end sites is all going to be from a design UX point of view, because people are just going to be using these tools and services to put them together. And I'm coming at this kind of from a different perspective than you guys, is that my background is doing app and iOS development, right? So I look at all this tooling and I'm like, yes, give me the build tools. Like, I need all this stuff. And I still remember when I first was using Expression Engine, like it was incredibly frustrating for me because I knew what I wanted it to do, but it wouldn't let me. Because there were no variables, or you had to use this specific syntax, or whatever.
Parse order.
Yeah, and I do think yeah, parse order. And I spent more time.
That shall not be named.
Yeah,
PTSD.
I spent more time banging my head into the wall trying to hammer this thing to do what I knew should be done, as opposed to actually doing it. And I think that the lower end sites are gone. Like if you want to be a designer and make lower end sites on these tools, then fine. But the money is going to be in these bespoke websites, and the kind of tooling and the kind of craftsmanship, no pun intended, that we can bring to the party in terms of making them awesome. When a 2% conversion rate means a big deal, or it makes a big difference. You know what I mean?
Right. And I don't know that it's a low end, high end site sort of dichotomy. And I think that you were right to bring up the point in the first place, because an enormous percentage of the usership of Craft is like designers who don't know a lot of code,
right.
But they know what they need to get done.
Right.
And Craft gives them this just really nice environment to do it in. And the key is, I don't think that that sort of person is being left behind. But on the flip side, when that person is ready to grow, this tool is not going to fight them. This tool is going to enable them.
That's a huge point. And especially if some of these service providers do offer them kind of one-click setup and hosting installs, then it's going to be fantastic. And you're right, the well is very deep. Like when they do want to learn, and when they do want to dive
I sort of
deep,
have to disagree, or at least question this a little bit, like this market for craft specific hosting or one-click install. I mean, maybe I'm wrong about this, but it seems like the market for like VPSs and stuff is so cheap now, and with the advent of tools like Server Pilot and Laravel Forge, like I just don't get paying for like managed hosting for a specific kind of one-click install or whatever. Maybe I'm wrong, but it just seems so easy and so cheap to do it yourself.
You're preaching to the choir, Jonathan. Like one of my pet peeves is boutique shared hosting. Like I think it's
and I think this experiment
worst.
has been tried before too. Like if anybody remembers the old days of engine hosting, which I guess eventually rolled into Architect.
Right.
But yeah, that was sort of the model of like, we're just going to be the expression engine host and stuff. Right. Well, like, I mean, I guess you can argue it wasn't successful because the platform that they were built their business on fell out of favor a little bit. But still, I mean, it seems like it was tried. People ultimately decided that they didn't like that model. I don't know.
Yeah, but at the same time, I mean, there's WP Engine and Acquia in the Drupal world, but WP Engine, I feel like if someone had a craft engine or whatever you want to call it, where it sets up a Git repository for you, it sets up good hosting for you, it does automatic backups, and it costs under $30 a month.
Yeah,
I think something like that would do really well.
I have a lot of empathy for the kind of person that just really digs WordPress.com. Like,
Empathy?
yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely. Like there's times, man, I want to just set something up. Like
Right.
I want to click a
Okay.
button
Right.
and just have it be on the internet in 20 seconds and not have to think about VPSs. And it's like, and this is coming from me, right? And I know how to do all this stuff, but
Yep.
just sometimes I just don't want it. Like some projects just like aren't
Yeah, they
worth
don't warrant
it.
it. They don't
It's like
warrant
if
it.
I
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
to spend 5 minutes setting up a VPS for a project, like that project is no longer worth it. And if you were someone who doesn't have the DevOps experience, like that is all the more intimidating. But like, I don't know. I feel like hosting it could be an episode unto itself. I think
I think that would be a very fun episode.
you
Oh,
know,
yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I think the point that we've sort of settled on is, I don't think Craft 3 is boxing anybody out, but I think it is opening up some new doors for people to grow.
Yeah, for sure. And Jonathan, like I understand what you're saying. Like my take on shared hosting or boutique hosting or whatever is that if you're doing it like you're screwing yourself because the amount of time that you have to spend fighting against it to get it to do what you want, so much easier to just use Forge or Server Pilot, spin up a VPS, get it working, deterministic setup, away we go. However, I can't even tell you the number of people that I've run into that they say, well, I don't want to be a sysadmin. I don't want to have to deal with any of this stuff. Like my client wants a number to call in the middle of the night so when something is going wrong or yada, yada, yada. And I do have a lot of sympathy for designer developers who, they started out as designers and they became developers, they kind of fell back into it because the amount of tooling that you need from a DevOps point of view and then on the other end of the spectrum, the front end frameworks, like the landscape out there is incredible, So I
Right.
do have some sympathy, and I think the fact that something could be offered to give these people a way to spin up craft easily could be a really good thing. Yeah. So does anyone else have any final thoughts on Craft 3 that they would like to mention before we put the first episode in the can?
Yeah, no, I mean, one thing that, I can say to anyone who's been holding off, I was terrified it's been 2.5 years now since I first heard of Craft 3, of the changes, especially with plugins and, the templating side really hasn't changed, but
Yep.
I was just terrified of what it was going to mean to have to learn really complicated, object-oriented stuff, more so than I've already done. But it's actually been really nice. Everything is so explicit in Craft 3. If you've wanted to learn PHP the right way, and I always felt like there was something weird about having to have camel Ks versus this Ks with underscores, all that's gone. It's just you're doing PHP the right way. It's been a lot of fun. I love coding in it. I can't wait to do more of it.
So the time is now.
Yep.
Yeah, the time is now for Craft 3. All right, well, gentlemen, thank you all for coming on. And want to let everyone know the website is devmode.fm, and you can follow us at devmodefm on Twitter. And for the DevMode FM podcast, I'm Andrew Welch.
Patrick Harrington.
Michael Rogg.
Jonathan Melville.
With a new baby named
Wesley.
All right.
Love it.
Signing off, gentlemen.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
See ya later.